What's going on, everyone? It's Mr. West. I hope we're all well. So welcome to another camera test, and this time it's again for the Nokia 7.1, and this time we're going to try it out in low light. I was pretty impressed by its daylight video capabilities given its price point. This is below £400 and it's a really decent and very smart looking mid-range Android handset. So we're starting off the video test in 480p at 30 frames per second from the front-facing camera. Now it does use the electronic image stabilisation in all of these modes from the front-facing camera. Now electronic image stabilisation can look a bit fuzzy and hazy in low light as it's compensating for the lower light. I mean, it's not the disaster I thought it was going to be. Perhaps I'm not giving the Nokia 7.1 the credit it deserves really, but you know, I wanted to try this lower resolution mode just to see what it looks like. We've got the expected lens flare there through the front facing camera, but it really isn't that bad, and we've got some good exposure on these cottages just behind me here, and also the passing cars. There doesn't seem to be lots of drop frames, which is good. So stepping things up a bit now to 720p at 30 frames per second, a slightly more manageable frame rate in terms of quality itself. Now as far as exposure and things like detail are concerned, all you're really getting is more pixels to get more detail from what you're seeing on the screen. The actual things like the electronic image stabilization, exposure and things like that are absolutely the same as you get in 480p, just offered some slightly better detail due to the 720p resolution. Now as I said in the daylight video test of the Nokia 7.1, it uses an 8 megapixel fixed focused. As I said in the daylight video test, the front-facing camera is an 8 megapixel fixed focus module, and it employs electronic image stabilization, so all of the resolutions from the front-facing camera. And if you're wearing headphones, you should be getting the benefit of the really good and very impressive Ozo spatial audio recording. So we'll just check out down the street behind us. So you can see, I mean, it still manages to pick out a fairly decent level of detail and exposure. If you look at these vans behind me here, I think it's pretty far down, so pretty much halfway down the street before it starts to lose any exposure and detail. So that, considering the price point, and you know, again, I'm not trying to discredit the phone here, but taking into consideration this is sub £400, it's really not bad at all. It does look more than acceptable. Alright, so this is a bit better. This is now the full resolution of the display, so this is 1080p at 30 frames per second. Now, due to the lower light situation, we're not expecting incredible results, but looking through the viewfinder, well, my face is a little bit orange, and I can see the difference with the slightly better resolution at 1080p. We are getting some lens flare by here from the front-facing camera from all these street lights behind us. Slightly oversaturated in the colour, but it's doing a good job of picking that out. You can just see the electronic image stabilization making compensation there. Now, things I can't see while it's recorded are things like drop frames, so you let me know what you think down in the comment section below. So that's it for the front-facing video. Now we're going to move to the rear camera, and we're going to check out 720p, 1080p and also 4K at 30 frames per second. Okay, so starting at the bottom of the pile as far as resolutions are concerned, this is 720p at 30 frames per second. Now the rear main camera is 12 megapixels and it can record video at up to 4K at 30 frames per second. Now in all but 4K, as you can probably see, the Nokia 7.1 utilises electronic image stabilisation to smooth out the video, and in 720p this is pretty much a compromised resolution if you do want to save some space. I'll just give a case in point there. This is the bottom of the range model, so it's 3GB RAM and 32GB of built-in storage. Now if you haven't got an SD card, I have found out quite quickly that internal storage does fill up reasonably quickly, so unless you want to offload to Google Photos or your chosen online photos app, then you are going to find you may need to delete some files pretty quickly. But luckily you can add an SD card, I believe up to 256 gigabytes, correct me if I'm wrong. So then you can record directly to the SD card and save yourself some precious space from the internal storage. Now looking at the image quality, again it's 720p, so we're not expecting wonders. So we'll check out exposure. So yeah, I mean the glare out there, that is pretty bad. I mean, like I said, I wasn't expecting wonders, but at 720p we are obviously in a compromised resolution here. I mean, but it is still picking out the post there, and it's sort of exposing that correctly, and it's also picking up the tree just off to the left of it. You can just see the changes to the electronic image stabilisation. Well, I can see that anyway, and we're getting some whiteout on the lens, which is expected. Now again, in this mode you get the Ozo spatial audio. So I don't want to spend too much time in 720p, but I just wanted to demonstrate what it looks like if you were to choose to use this option. Just for some basic blogging maybe, but the option is there if you need it. Okay, so we're now at 1080p at 30 frames per second. So we'll just start off and see how the autofocus fares in this resolution. So if we look at this small text on this bus stop here, I mean it's doing a pretty good job. You are getting some focus hunting, but it really isn't that bad. Let's just try. I mean, it's really quick. I'll put my hand in front there. It does a good job of just getting a quick lock on the focus, which is good. Let's try the illustration of the bus. And again, doing a good job. Let's just try on something in this direction where there's not so much light. Cracking job. Try again. There we go. And it does do actually not a bad job. It does take a little while to get the focus on the subject. But again, I mean, that's really good. Considering the size of the sensor, that autofocus is very quick. So we'll continue in 1080p at 30 frames per second. Now again, we're getting exactly the same result from the street lamp in that it is just completely blowing that out. Instead of that being just a more defined circle, it is completely just looks like it's exploded. Now you're not going to be recording this, obviously, this is completely unrealistic, but it's just testing out things like how it handles changes in exposure and also bright light objects as well. So let's see if we can dig out any detail in the distance over there. So here we can see the street lamps lining that main road, which is around about half a mile away. And can we make out any of the clouds whatsoever? They are there. No. Again, I'm not expecting to, but maybe we can pick up that tree in the distance. Now you may recognise that from some of my other video tests that has appeared in daylight. Check out the focus on the oncoming cars here. Can sometimes trip up the focus module, but nope, doing a great job. So let's check out zoom. So yeah, I mean, this is needs must, obviously. If we can just push to focus, no, we're past the realms of sharp focus now, but this is literally a needs must basis. You're not going to be using this in any great capacity. If it's just try walking, see how the image stabilization fares. So this is around about ×2 or 3 zoom. The thing is with the viewfinder, it doesn't really give you any indication of how far zoomed in you are, so you have to kind of play it by ear and use your own vision. You can see it's introduced quite a lot of grain. So perhaps if you're at a concert and you want to zoom in on your favourite artist like Britney Spears or Justin Bieber maybe, then this may do the trick. So we'll just back out of there, just go back to normal. And let's look at like a numpty and try out the image stabilization in the dark at 1080p at 30 frames per second. And we can see there, I mean, how good is that stabilization? It is rock solid. Very, very impressive. It's losing itself a bit now because I can't run for toffee, but I mean, that isn't bad at all. So looking at the exposure on this cottage here, just in the center of the image. Now, at this point, there is some grain, but as we get closer to this street light just here, we should see some improvement. So, let's be honest, that is perfectly acceptable. If we just look down the street there, we can make out the windows in the houses right in the center of the image. And so we can just zoom in on that street sign and get any detail. So it's called Morse Row. You can just make that out, Morse Row. The focus is going absolutely crazy. And accurate colour rendering of the warm white of the light in that window. I do know these people, don't worry. So let's move into a slightly more contrasty scene where the light isn't so brilliant. So, yep, we can make out that that van is white. That's cool. Now let's see if we can just focus on this bus stop sign. It's even making out the model pattern there, which obviously helps to reflect light in the dark. You can see. So, I mean, that's not bad. I mean, I'm not picking out the greatest detail, but this bus stop sign isn't in the best shape in the first place anyway. So that is sight accurate, I say. Coupled with autofocus, so we go. It's just finding itself in the lower light. So a lot of hunting going on. I can see the autofocus going crazy on the screen, but it still doesn't look bad. Okay, so that's 1080p at 30 frames per second. So let's move up to 4K now and see how that looks. So we're now at the max resolution, which is 4K at 30 frames per second. So sadly at this resolution we lose electronic image stabilisation. So we do get more wobbles in the footsteps, which are quite evident. Now looking at this here, we can see it's kind of like a almost cloudy look, where it's, instead of just making the background completely dark, it's trying to draw in as much exposure as it can in this admittedly quite challenging kind of light, because there's no street light in here. I mean, we can just about make out the top of the branch on that tree. You can see that it's making changes for exposure on that house in the distance there. And it's doing a good job of picking out the blue UV lights through the window, just on the left of that house there. Now, I walk past this house pretty much every single day, and that is what I can see. So it's not bad, but it's really struggling here with focus in this mode, you can see. And I'm going to start pushing the viewfinder. I'm just going to leave the phone do its thing, because if you want to buy this phone, you need to see exactly how it behaves in these low light situations. I think I do need to give it some help. 1 second. There we go. So let's continue. Here we go. The lack of stabilisation in this mode is a bit tricky, but we're not doing too bad at the moment. So let's try out the autofocus on this sign here at 4K. Yeah, and we can make out the reflective surface on the sign. You can just about make out the yellow of the sign here. And it's picking out some of the blemishes on the post really well. And you can just pick out the school in the background there. We'll just move behind here. We can pick out the green security light dead center in the image there. So not bad. Continue. So right up ahead, right here, we've got the floodlight to the rugby field blowing out the camera a little bit. And we can see there is a lot of grain in the image. Now you can temper this by reducing the exposure level slightly, just by pushing on the image. But it then automatically adjusts itself again for exposure. Now, just before the end of the video, I will show you the drop frames and spatial audio test in 4K at 30 frames per second. I like to do that just to see how the sensor handles slightly faster moving objects in low light situation. Okay, so last part of the night video test. We're recording in 4K at 30 frames per second. So we do this in daylight, and we're also going to do it at night as well to see how it affects the video processing. We're going to take a trip through the tunnel, check for any drop frames to the video. So look carefully, you should look at any objects that we're passing and just see if they stutter a little bit. And also what we'll do, we'll check out the really awesome Ozo spatial audio. So here we go. So that's the end of the Nokia 7.1 low light video test. Now, we can't expect miracles. This is a sub £400 handset, and with a comparatively small sensor size, it's not going to be absolutely outlandish quality video in low light, but I don't think it does too bad a job. I mean, it's perfectly acceptable, and in much better lit environments in the dark you will get much better results. But the purpose of this test is to show you how the phone actually performs in a normal evening scenario. So I mean, it's quite dark around here, so really pushing the small sensors to their limits, but it's realistic, and it just shows you what this phone is capable of. So if you've got any questions or comments, please drop those in the comment section down below, and I'll look to get back to you as soon as possible. Similarly, if this is your first time here, then please consider subscribing. Your support will be greatly appreciated, and it means you don't miss more great content and camera tests coming very, very soon. But for now, that concludes my Nokia 7.1 low light video test. Thanks for watching, guys. My name's Mr. West, and I'll catch you guys later.